Okay, so we're diving into something pretty interesting this time. Someone has sent in this stuff about how quantum physics could connect with hypnosis.
Yeah.
It's specifically the work of this guy, Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.
Yeah.
And we want to really get to the core of his ideas, the thinking behind it all, but keeping in mind, our listeners like things thorough but quick.
Exactly. Respecting that desire for deep insights without, spending hours on it.
Right, right. So we're aiming to understand this whole integration he's talking about, where he's coming from, what he's drawing on,
Yeah.
and even some maybe less mainstream ideas he brings in.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the whole picture, his background, his interpretations of things, how he uses existing frameworks, and even steps outside of them a bit.
So first things first, who is this Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander guy? He seems to have done a whole bunch of different things.
He does. It's pretty fascinating, actually. The sources we have point to experience and entertainment, writing about all sorts of subjects, and podcasting, too, focusing on, achievement and even AI.
Oh, so all over the place.
Yeah, and this eclectic background, could really contribute to his ability to see connections that most people wouldn't.
That makes sense. So he's not just coming at this from one angle.
Exactly. And something crucial here is his formal training in hypnosis. He trained at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute back in 2006.
Okay, so that's got to be important.
Hugely important.
Right.
HMI is the first nationally accredited hypnotherapy college. They really emphasize understanding the subconscious mind, which, is a key focus in hypnosis, and probably a big influence on Alexander's later theoretical work.
I see. So this HMI background is like his solid grounding.
Exactly. And then later on, he even earned a Doctor of Metaphysics degree.
Oh, wow. So maybe that's where he starts bridging those practical hypnosis skills with some more, abstract concepts.
Could be. Now, one of the more interesting things he does is take this acronym MARS, usually used in Red Cross teaching.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And he gives it this whole quantum spin.
Okay, so break that down for us. What's he doing with this Mars thing?
So traditionally, MARS stands for Motivation Association Repetition Sensors. It's a mnemonic for effective teaching.
Right, like for first aid and stuff.
Exactly. But Alexander, he interprets Mars metaphorically to connect hypnosis and quantum principles. It's pretty creative.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So how does he make those connections? What are the parallels he's drawing?
So he links motivation in hypnosis to the quantum observer effect, suggesting that focused intention can actually shape your experience, kind of like how observing something in quantum mechanics can change it.
That's trippy.
Then there's association, which he connects to quantum entanglement. This hints at this interconnectedness of everything.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here.
Right. Then there's repetition linked to quantum decoherence, which is about how quantum states stabilize over time.
And I'm guessing sensors connects to something about measurement.
You got it. He related to quantum measurement, where the act of interacting with something actually alters the system.
So he's basically saying that by focusing our attention and repeating things in hypnosis, we might be tapping into these quantum processes.
That's the general idea. Now, it's really important to remember that these are metaphorical bridges, not like scientifically established links.
Right, right. Because quantum physics and hypnosis are on such different scales.
Exactly. But even just metaphorically, it's pretty thought-provoking.
It is. It makes you think about the power of our minds and how they might interact with reality on a much deeper level than we realize.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there. He also sees parallels between those core quantum concepts like the observer effect, superposition, and decoherence with what happens in hypnosis.
Okay, let's unpack that. How do those line up?
Well, he proposes that focused attention in hypnosis mirrors that observer effect we talked about, where just observing something can change it.
Right, right.
And then heightened suggestibility. The state you're in during hypnosis aligns with superposition, that idea that things can exist in multiple potential states at once.
So like you're more open to suggestions because your mind is in this state of possibility.
Yeah, something like that. And then finally, the process of coming back to normal consciousness after hypnosis resembles decoherence, where those quantum possibilities collapse into a single outcome.
So basically coming back to reality.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, these are all conceptual parallels. They offer a new lens to view consciousness through.
Very cool. But now he takes things even further, right?
Yeah.
He brings in this theory of subquantum kinetics and something called the etheric substrate.
He does.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into some less mainstream territory. Subquantum kinetics is a theory developed by LaViolette.
Okay, and what's that all about?
It basically posits that there's this dynamic transmuting ether that underlies all of reality, and that the particles we see are actually wave patterns within this ether.
Hold on, so this ether, It's not like the old 19th century ether they disproved, right?
No, no, it's not static. It's constantly changing and transmuting. Hence the name subquantum kinetics.
Oh, okay, I see. So is this like a unified field theory kind of thing?
It aims to be. And it makes some pretty interesting predictions, like a specific energy profile for nucleons and more frequent galactic core explosions.
Wow. So is there any evidence for this theory?
Well, LaViolette claims some things support it, like the Pioneer anomaly and how interstellar dust enters our solar system. But, mainstream science hasn't really embraced it.
Right, I can imagine that.
But here's how Alexander uses it. He suggests that consciousness, especially in this focused state of hypnosis, might be able to interact with this fundamental level of reality, this etheric substrate.
So our minds could actually influence the very fabric of reality.
Potentially, at least within this theoretical framework. And that's where the idea of manifestation could come in. The idea that we can bring things into being through our thoughts and intentions.
Okay, I gotta say, this is all pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But we need to be super clear here that this subquantum kinetics thing is a fringe theory.
Absolutely. It's not widely accepted, and any implications for hypnosis are highly speculative.
Right, right. So let's move on to another interesting connection he makes. He links Culpa's, these thought forms, to organic AI and says hypnosis is the algorithm to create them.
It's a unique perspective. For those who don't know, tulpas come from Tibetan Buddhism. They're like materialized thought forms. And in some Western online communities, people talk about creating tulpas as like willed imaginary friends that seem autonomous.
So like superpowered imaginary friends.
In a way, psychologically, it's understood as a form of very vivid imagination. But Alexander takes it further. He views creating tulpas through this focused mental effort and belief as analogous to how we train AI.
Interesting. So the tulpa is like the AI and our minds are the programmers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he sees hypnosis as providing the structure, the algorithm to do this effectively through focused intention and visualization.
So like giving your mind the right instructions to create this tulpa.
Precisely. And actually, some people who create tulpas do use self-hypnosis techniques.
That makes sense. So how does this whole subquantum view tie in with the idea that hypnosis can cause physical effects like healing?
Within that speculative subquantum framework-focused hypnotic mental energy could potentially interact with the etheric substrate, influencing those subquantum processes, and maybe even leading to physical changes in the body.
So it's like our minds tapping into this deeper level of reality and causing ripples that manifest physically?
That's the idea. But again,
Okay.
we have to stress that this is all highly theoretical and relies on accepting the subquantum kinetics framework, which is not mainstream science.
Right, right. So the sources mention some practical examples in something called quantum association, but they're pretty brief. Any insights on those?
Well, it sounds like he might be talking about things like using motivational repetition during exercise, like repeatedly affirming your physical goals while working out.
Makes sense. That's a pretty common technique.
It is. And this quantum association idea is probably Alexander's way of trying to link that psychological process of association with what's happening at the quantum level.
So maybe he's suggesting that those repeated affirmations are somehow influencing those subquantum processes we talked about.
Possibly. Or he might be thinking of some kind of non-standard entanglement between the mind and physical reality. But of course, mainstream psychology explains the effectiveness of motivational repetition through more conventional means, like enhanced motivation, self-belief, and focus.
Right. So there are already established explanations for why those techniques work.
Exactly. So this quantum association thing is a more speculative way of framing those effects.
Okay, now for the big question. Is there any actual scientific evidence to support these quantum hypnosis links, especially for things like healing?
Well, hypnosis itself has been shown to be effective for things like chronic pain and phobias.
Right. There's good evidence for that.
And that's through established psychological and neurological mechanisms. But the material we have doesn't present any documented cases where those effects were achieved by manipulating some kind of etheric substrate.
Yeah, that'd be pretty groundbreaking.
It would. And if that kind of evidence existed, it would probably be in the literature related to those specific fringe theories, not so much in mainstream scientific journals.
Right, that makes sense. So to wrap things up, it seems like Alexander is presenting a really fascinating, albeit unconventional integration of established hypnosis practices with some pretty out there ideas.
I think that's a fair assessment. He blends his solid foundation in hypnosis with these speculative theories that push the boundaries of what we currently understand.
And even though those parallels he draws are super intriguing, mainstream science isn't quite there yet in terms of validating a direct causal link between quantum principles and how hypnosis works.
True. But who knows what future research might uncover?
Exactly. This whole deep dive really makes you wonder, what if consciousness does play a much more fundamental role in shaping reality than we currently think? And how might practices like focused attention and hypnosis tap into that, even if we don't fully grasp the mechanisms yet?
Lots to ponder, for sure.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining me on this one. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure. It's always fun to explore these uncharted territories.
And for our listeners, keep those questions coming. We're always up for diving deep into whatever fascinating topics you throw our way.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring.
And keep an open mind.
Always a good idea.
See you, folks.
Take care.